Katura and I have been at this for a while. I don't know, Katura, it's been 6 years. Would you have thought 6 years ago that we'd be doing this still? And I guess we're committed to continuing until we get this done.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's been 6 years, but every time you say that, I'm like, wow, it's been 6 years. And so hopefully it won't take us another 6 to make it happen. I agree.
Well, we've had an awful lot of help along the way. I think I've counted over 20 organizations, about 60 people, mostly professionals in the early learning field, have contributed to the pre-K priority over that time. And I was looking too, when we first met, there were 10 organizations in the original steering committee, and 8 of them are still represented in the current steering committee. And 2 of the other ones are like tremendous supporters, like Forsyth Future. So all the organizations have stuck with it over the time. When we got started, one of the first work groups that was formed was the quality work group. And I know that was headed by Eva Phillips from the school district, and a lot of school district staff were participating in that, and really came up with what are the elements, the components of quality that we need to include in a pre-K program. And I know we had a lot of discussions early on too, between, do we say just quality or do we say high quality?
Right.
And I think we've pretty much stayed with high quality because we're aiming high. I know you're certainly attuned to what quality is about in the work you do. Kind of what are some of the ingredients of quality in a high quality pre-K program?
Right. So I think we have a slide that we can show. It's titled Key Components for a Successful Pre-K Program. And in that slide, it looks at all of the different indicators of a high quality program. And so when we looked at the programs that were available in our community, most of the NC pre-K programs, which is our current pre-K system in Forsyth County, they either had like 4 or 5-star license in order to be a part of the NC pre-K. And then they had to meet some of the components that we identified as necessary for a pre-K program. Even though some of the components were met, not what we thought about as high quality needed a few additional pieces. And so when you think about the education of the teachers, the teacher's degree, the family and community engagement, continuous program evaluations, some of those things are available in some programs, but they aren't available in all of the programs in our community. And so thinking about how we create a system that really works and supports all of the programs as well as the children in our community. We know that there are some challenges that we're facing because right now, early ed teachers are in high demand and hard to find, especially those with degrees and those with the skill set that is needed. And so, thinking about how we increase the compensation for those teachers, how we provide them with benefits. We want the teachers to not be stressed, but to be thriving. And that's one of the most important ingredients in a high quality system is the relationship that the teachers build with the children. I think that's like key. And then the rest of the stuff is just like icing on the cake, all of the other supports that they can have. But just thinking about how we overcome the challenges and how we build support in the community. We've seen with COVID that this childcare system is fragile and needs additional community supports. And so how we get people to the understanding that this is what 4-year-old children need to be prepared for school. And we want them all to come ready for school success.
Those are important elements. And, I think along the way here, we've had a quality program in North Carolina, through the state. It was originally called More at 4. Now it's called the North Carolina Pre-K program. And it's had national recognition for its quality. But interestingly enough, I think it's worth taking note that its ranking has fallen a little bit. You can see that on the next slide. there's an assessment that the National Institute for Early Education Research does, NEAR, that looks at the quality of programs across the country. And as you can see here, they have I think it's a list of 10, kind of the top 10 components. And right now, the NC Pre-K program is only checking 8 of them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note one that isn't checked in particular, which is staff professional development, because that's something that we've placed a lot of emphasis on in our development of those standards for the pre-K priority. That yes, you need the degree, you need that kind of experience, but the ongoing professional development, coaching, mentoring is essential for a high quality program. So I think that's really important to note. And the other thing that's not, I believe, not even on this list is one that I think all of us came to a unanimous conclusion that we needed, that family engagement. Right. Connecting with families so that they are continuing to do at home what's happening in the classroom, as well as connecting families with resources in the community if that's needed. So, so that's, I think, why we call what we're looking at doing, calling it high quality.
I would agree with that 100%, Bob, because you can't help the child if you don't help the whole family. And so the family has to be engaged in the process.
Yeah. So, you know, looking back to when we got started 6 years ago, I think all of us came around the table recognizing how important this was, really based in a great measure on the disparities that exist for young children in terms of their education, both in regard to being ready for school at kindergarten, and you can kind of measure that in terms of their being prepared to learn to read, as well as kind of how they're doing by third grade. I think everybody's pretty aware of the third grade proficiency scores and how important they are. And I think that was one of the strong motivating factors when it came to why we wanted to have what at the time we called a universal pre-K system. But really, I think it's just making it available to all children who could benefit from it. And all children really can benefit from it. And I think that's why when we looked at our program, you know, we really talked about it being something that's available certainly to help children who are at risk of falling behind, but something that can benefit all our children.
Right. Even though you see children with lots of resources who may come from middle income families, that doesn't mean that they have the information that they need to be successfully prepared for school. Most of the times they are, but some of the times those families still need a lot of support, and those children need support to get prepared. And so I've always advocated for a program that is a all versus a program for them, because sometimes when you just focus on lower income children, then the whole community doesn't see it as a community for all of the families in our area. And so just thinking about, you know, that equity versus equality. And I think we have a slide that shows that equity begins with pre-K, and you can see on the left side, and people are talking a lot about equity these days and equality. And I remember when I first started working, I was like, but I want everything to be equal. That's what I said to my supervisor. And she always said, well, we can be fair with everybody, but that doesn't necessarily mean equal. And when you think about your own family and how you raise your children, if you have children, each child needs something different. And so that's kind of what this slide shows. On the left side, you can see that the kids all have access to the apples, but they may not all be able to reach the apples. And then on the right side, you can see where every child has what they need to be able to get to that starting point. And so I think that's what we're kind of looking for, is ensuring equity for all of the kids in our community, giving them what they need, giving their families what they need, so that they may start in different places, but they're all end up ready for school. And so, you know, that's kind of the whole goal behind the pre-K, ensuring that we don't have that 40 or 50% of children in our community who come not ready, which benefits all of the children who are in that kindergarten classroom in the end.
Yeah, well, speaking of readiness, in preparing for this webinar, I went back to the archives in order to see where we were about 7 years ago, when it came to disparities, educational disparities in our community, and really focused on that kindergarten readiness, the readiness to be able to be prepared to learn to read, which is measured by an assessment tool that's called DIBELS. I won't spell it out, but it has a real academic name. And it's what the school district has used since 2013 to look at if children are coming into kindergarten prepared to learn to read. So let's take a look at the next slide, because it shows with the blue columns. Back in 2013, these were the percent of children entering kindergarten who were at risk of not doing well in reading. So the higher the percentage, the worse the result. That represents the percentage of children not doing well when they come to kindergarten, and really, in some ways, saying that's likely to continue unless there's some sort of mediation. So you can see what the blue columns indicate, and really the disparities. I mean, it's almost like a stairs there. If you go from white non-Hispanic kindergartners to African American to Hispanic Latino, it goes from 28% up to 62%, again, at risk of not doing well in reading in later grades. So there you really see, I mean, 28% even is too much to begin with, but those disparities back in 2013 were huge. Now, I threw in those orange columns. What does that represent? Well, that represents a goal that at least Forsyth Futures commented on back in 2013. You know, what would happen if we were able to reduce this measure of children not doing well by 10%? And so what you see is where we would have been or could have been if and the goal was set for 2020, by the way. It was a 7-year goal just to reduce by 10%. And so the orange column represents where we'd be if we were able to achieve that 10% reduction over the 7 years. Well, we're not quite at a full 7 years because we don't have the data yet for 2019-20, but we do have it for 2018-19. And the next slide shows where we are like 6 years later. That's the gray bar. And as you can see, for every group, our situation is worse than it was 6 years ago.
Right.
For all children.
Right. And we've been working so hard, so it's hard to figure out what's happened.
Right. No, it's not for lack of effort, and it's not for lack of the commitment of everybody that's involved, but it's really clear that we're not making progress. Right. And that's every year. And, you know, I was going to at some point translate those percentages into the number of children. Mm-hmm. And I could just do it, say, for the 51% of all students right now who are at risk. You know, that represents about 2,300 children.
Right.
So we've got a long way to go here. And I think that's one of the reasons that we really are behind high quality pre-K as one thing that we can definitely do that can have an impact. And I don't think any of us involved with the pre-K priority said, well, it's the only thing we need to do. You know, I think all of us stopped believing in silver bullets a long time ago. Right. There's just a number of things that we need to be working on. But high quality pre-K has demonstrated that it can have an impact on these disparities. And I'd like to go to the next slide because it's something just came out within the last couple of months. Again, it was published by NEAR. But it was a report on studies of two high-quality pre-K programs, one in Boston and the other in Tulsa. And if you look at the rectangle up at the top, this is the disparity for kindergartners upon entry between Black and white students. And you can see the achievement gap in reading is 6.7 months, in math it's 8.9 months. And below, what they looked at was what happens if children are enrolled in a high quality pre-K program? What happens to those disparities? Mm-hmm. And if you look at the kind of blue rows down at the bottom, what they found was that in math, the reduction in the achievement gap is almost half, going down from near 9 months to just about 5 months. And in reading, the achievement gap is practically eliminated from 6.7 months to a tenth of a month. And again, these are not outliers. This isn't like the only study that's shown that pre-K can have an impact. But again, I would emphasize what they say in their write-up. It's high quality pre-K. Right. Programs that really have all the elements you need to be able to get those kinds of results.
Right, which include the full family support, the educated teachers, the well-compensated teachers, all of that as a part of a high quality system. So, when we started looking at this, we were like, how are we going to house all these children? Where will they go? Where will we find the classrooms? But then once the feasibility study was completed, we discovered that much of the need of the children in our community with high quality pre-K could be met by increasing the quality of existing programs. And as we were working with Forsyth Futures to survey families, we realized that, as we were working with the childcare programs to survey their slots, we realized that there was enough capacity for those 4-year-olds, just with a little bit of additional resources, some coaching, some support, possibly helping some programs become licensed. And so we really do in our community with the mixture of preschool programs, private childcare sites, school system sites, have the capacity to meet the needs of all of the children in our community who might be 4 at the particular time that the program is operating.
Yeah, I think Forsyth Futures did a pre-K feasibility study for us. Very thorough document. I think they came in at around 176 pages, so that's pretty heavy going. But there is a summary of that report that's available on the Pre-K Priority website, prekpriority.org. And in that, they estimated that currently the capacity of our current providers could allow for an additional 1,000 4-year-olds to be enrolled. So we have a lot of ability to add to high quality pre-K just with our existing providers. But again, it's that quality measure, and that's the graph that you see up on the screen came out of the Forsyth Futures pre-K feasibility study. And you can see arrayed on the left-hand side there are all of those quality components that we talked about earlier. And you can see the percentage of the providers that Forsyth Futures surveyed that meet those various quality components. And so there are some, like at least a nutritious meal, that is up there close to 75 or 80%. But in terms of having all of the screenings and the referrals and so on, the early intervention, that's not even around maybe 10 or 12%. So there's quite a range here. And it really, I think when we learned this, it kind of changed our focus from how do we add more sites to how do we improve the quality of our existing sites. And a big question we had was, would the providers in the community, would they go with improving quality? Again, if they had the resources provided, would they be willing to? And I think the next slide kind of shows the results of that survey. Again, this is the same standards, and the green on the bars, that's where the providers currently are in terms of quality. But you can see that when you're really asking them if they can improve quality in these areas, there are some that can improve and have better quality without getting additional resources. That's in orange. And then the purple is, if we had the resources, we'd be glad to improve the quality. So I think what this told us is the key to expanding high quality pre-K in Forsyth County is to concentrate on the quality of our existing providers.
Right. And I think when you think about the quality of providers, you really have to understand the licensing system that we currently have, because providers choose to meet higher standards voluntarily anyway, with the promise of additional compensation. And so many providers in our community want to do the best job they can to serve children and provide the highest quality. It's just, again, as you were saying, the resources that are available, and how, just having access to additional supports. So we also talk with parents and their perceptions of high quality and how those match the pre-K standards. And I think if you'll move to the next slide, we have a slide that what parents saw as important quality features. And so it's not surprising that they, saw the education of the teachers, the ongoing professional development, the facility that the children were in, the star rating, the curriculum, those things as being most important. And I think, when we talk with families out in the community, they just assume that teachers are going to have that education. They think of them as teachers, and so they think that all teachers are going to meet the standards. But we know that in order to have the best teachers, we've got to do something again with that education and compensation system to help improve the overall quality in our pre-K classrooms. And then when you think about the average salary of teachers in our community with 4-year degrees, and quite a few of our teachers do have 4-year degrees, you're talking about $12.50 to $15, and then and $15 is high for most child care programs, but then they don't have benefits and they don't have retirement. And so, we don't really want teachers to be in survival mode. We want them to thrive so that they can educate children. And I think that from this poll, we see that that's what parents want as well. Of course, meals are important, and the parent and family engagement is important. All of the things that parents say that they want, lower child staff ratios, all of those things are also indicators that we felt were important and led to a high quality program. And I think 90% of the parents surveyed said that they would enroll their child in a high quality, affordable pre-K program. And so not only are families looking for, I think it's probably the affordable piece, because childcare really does take a big chunk out of most families' budgets. I know my son has 2 children, and he's paying $2,000 a month for childcare, which is a lot when you think about a family's income at $24,000 a year. And I know we've seen a lot of that on TV as well lately. And so being able to have something that could help families as well as get the children prepared for school readiness is key.
Yeah, we've certainly been talking about improving quality means getting additional resources. Making it affordable means getting additional resources.
Right.
And one of the main sources of support for quality pre-K programs has been the North Carolina pre-K program. Even though at the rates that it has do not cover the full cost of a program, they may cover 50 to maybe 70% of the actual cost. But still, it's a very significant source of income for any county to build its quality pre-K, high quality pre-K system. But in the course of our kind of research on where we are as a community, we came across some rather startling facts that I'd like to share next on the next slide about where we stand. Go forward. Where we stand as a county when it comes to being able to access the dollars from the North Carolina pre-K program. So if you look at these 2 bar graphs, the one at the top looks at 5 different counties, and the bar indicates the percentage of eligible children that are enrolled in the North Carolina pre-K program. And roughly speaking, to be eligible, your family income has to be at or below 75% of the state median income. So these are both lower income to kind of low middle income families who otherwise couldn't afford pre-K. Mm-hmm. But we talked about the disparities that our children face. in regard to getting off to a good start in school, the disparities in being ready to learn to read and in third grade proficiency. Well, Forsyth County itself has a huge disparity. If you look at us, Forsyth County, only 27% of our eligible children are enrolled in the North Carolina pre-K program, much below these other counties, especially Guilford, just right next door, where 67% of eligible children are enrolled in a North Carolina pre-K program classroom. Those are the percentages, but that also translates into actual children. And if you look at the bar graph below, what it means is that, again, in Forsyth County, in 2019-20, we had 739 slots for children in the North Carolina pre-K program. Whereas in Guilford County, with 67% eligible children enrolled, they had almost 2,200. So that's almost pretty close to 3 times as much as we have, but Guilford County is only 50% larger.
Right.
So we've seen this as a major issue we have to address, and I think it's coming to the fore at the state level in terms of how the North Carolina pre-K dollars are allocated. So we want to build on that, but you know, there's a state responsibility, but a lot of local governments, local county governments are stepping forward also to make investments in pre-K. And this next slide, the map of North Carolina, features 4 counties and how much the local counties have used tax dollars to expand their high quality pre-K program. So you can see there's Mecklenburg, and that's where you are right now, Katura, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Mecklenburg, almost $25 million that they've invested locally, local tax dollars. I think they even raised property taxes to do that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, 40%.
How much?
40%, by 40%.
Whoa. But I guess there hasn't been a revolt. People are really quite willing to support the education of their children and the future of their community. Even in Durham County, we can see in Durham County, it's at least 10 million. I think it may have gone up a little bit since then as well, but at least 10 million in local dollars to expand high quality pre-K. And Buncombe County put aside some money. I think it wasn't only for pre-K, it was for early learning in general. But some major investments, and then we go to Forsyth County and we see we have yet to invest $1 of local dollars in our pre-K programs. And again, that's something I think we're really looking to have an impact on through the pre-K priority. I think there are times where, because of the needing high quality and taking a look at North Carolina pre-K program doesn't meet all of those standards, that can be a place where local government can fill that gap and make sure we have a high quality system.
Right. And I always say, and I know people who've heard me say this before, and some of you probably haven't, but it always amazes me as to children turn 5 and we're happy to fund their education with our tax dollars. And I don't think people think about children in the birth to 5. And in this instance, 4-year-olds also needing that funding for their education, because it's all, children begin learning at birth. And we know the brain science says that 0 to 3 is the time when the brain develops. And I would say probably it's that 0 to 5 years is the biggest chunk of brain development for children. And so just thinking about how we change the mindset of people in our community to say, okay, we need to support early education so that children will have what they need to be ready for school and ready for lifelong success.
Well, and I think there are a lot of minds that are in favor of high quality pre-K, but it's how do we get to actually have the political will to make it happen? And right. I think Leslie began this session by talking about kind of our goal right now with the pre-K priority is to encourage our elected officials to establish a community-wide early childhood education task force to really take a look at where we are in Forsyth County, to draw upon a lot of the resources we have. I mean, all of those providers who are willing to improve their quality. And the pre-K priority has done a lot of work to gather all of the data, all of the research, all of the standards that we need to really implement a high quality system. So that's what this campaign is about, that this webinar is kind of launching We're going to have some additional webinars coming up over the next couple months, taking a look at equity, taking a look at quality in greater detail, and about the impact on the economy of early ed and pre-K in particular. So there will be much more ahead as we really look to mobilize our community to take some action, to really do what these other counties have done. You know, those other counties that it shows where they've invested dollars. Mm-hmm. Well, that came out of having a task force that was put together by elected officials to come up with recommendations for how to go forward. So I think that's going to be our next step.
I agree, and we can do it in Forsyth. We can do it.
Yep. So I think that's kind of what we had to share, and we'd certainly be open for any questions that we could try to answer. Leslie, I think you've been looking at the questions coming in. You're muted, though. There you go.
Yes, thank you. And I would encourage people to please type in any questions or comments you have in that Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. One of the first things that came up was a question in regard to the kindergarten readiness 2019 slide that was about at-risk children, not, I guess, with the reading in their later years at that third grade reading score. Mm-hmm. That it seemed very puzzling. This participant was also, I think, very discouraged that and shocked that the numbers have not decreased when there has been some efforts at different levels to make some kind of movement in that. I don't know if there's anything else you got, either one of you want to speak to about that, because I know the school system is quite concerned about it as well, and they continue to work towards decreasing that number.
Yeah, I would only add one slide that we didn't show, but it actually came out of the Forsyth Promises annual report back in 2019, as they looked at the third grade proficiency scores. And at least they had those scores for a 3-year period from 2016 to 2019. And they've remained pretty much flat in terms of, at least over those 3 years, they haven't declined, but they still remain high, with about half of students not being proficient, and about 2/3 roughly of African American and Hispanic Latino children not being proficient in reading at third grade. So yeah, I guess when you look at that, those scores upon entering kindergarten are unfortunately kind of predictive. It kind of continues and shows itself in those third grade proficiency scores. Yeah, it's a problem that doesn't lend itself to easy solutions, because it's so complex, and we know there are just so many factors that go into why there are disparities. And again, I think one of our discussions in our next webinar, which by the way is going to be on September 22nd, just kind of confirmed that, 5 o'clock, September 22nd, the focus will be on equity and taking a look at what the issues are with the disparities, how can we address them, and I think it will reflect too the fact that there are other disparities, especially that communities of color face because of a legacy of injustices, affects employment, health, education, housing, all kinds of issues. So I think that makes this a very difficult problem to resolve, because it is so complex. But I think what we're looking at is that a well-crafted, high-quality pre-K program can have an impact, and maybe is that entry point into beginning to address some of the other disparities as well.
Well, and I think when you look at our community and just knowing the licensed childcare situation for children, many children in our community aren't enrolled in any type of formal childcare, even at age 4. And so just thinking about this pre-K priority system of pre-K classrooms for children will help bring more children into that licensed formal system where they can have, better early learning opportunities. Not to say that what they're getting now, because we really don't know what they're getting now, but at least we will have a more formal way of assessing what children are getting in our community.
Okay, the next question I want to put to our panel. Is there any hope for funding from the $1 billion that the NC legislature approved this week? Some goes to K through 12, but is pre-K funding a possibility?
I don't think pre-K was included in that. I know some of the funds were allotted to Smart Start, not a whole lot. And some of those funds were allotted to like remote learning for school-age children. So there was more of a focus on school-agers, but not necessarily pre-K. But when we think about it, we have a pre-K pot of money. It's called the North Carolina Education Lottery. And so just figuring out how we devote those funds to support education versus all of the other variety of things, and how we get pre-K included in that, versus as well as advocating for local money at the community level and at the state level to support pre-K programs.
Yeah, I'd say something to keep an eye on here is something that has been going on for quite a while. Before I arrived in North Carolina, there was the Leandro ruling and case that looked at what North Carolina needed to do to meet its constitutional obligation to provide a quality education for all of its residents, its children. And again, it was found that the state has been lacking in terms of being able to provide that, and needs some additional funding to be committed to education. And that is considered not only to be K through 12, but pre-K is something that is included in the discussions around how to meet the, to meet what the Leandro ruling is indicating needs to be invested. And I don't know, Katura, I don't want to throw out a number and not be responsible for it, but I think there's at least more than $2-3 billion that is needed to bring us up to where we need to be to meet that constitutional requirement.
Right, because even though we have an NC pre-K program, those the rates that those programs receive have been stagnant for a while and haven't been increasing. So we have providers who are serving preschool children through this program, but then they're serving them at rates that are 5 years old. And so, how we really support the system of pre-K in our state and how we add to and ensure that we're serving all children. More resources, that's my mantra.
Okay, another question that's come up, and not sure how much you can expand on this, but of course, we have parents that are currently in situations that are affected by COVID-19. Some of those may be going and doing some kind of virtual or remote, version of preschool or pre-K. But what do you guys see as some next steps, as whether it's connected to COVID-19 or when we get back to normal, that we can take to expand on these plans that you want to do with pre-K priority?
So we're looking at the future, maybe beyond the current difficulties and challenges. And I think, again, that's where the pre-K priority was really all about. And, when we started out, there's 6 years of work that's gone into this. And I think it's especially been even more intense in the last 3 years or so. And again, Leslie, you've had a lot to do with that in terms of helping to develop all of the reports that we've produced, to make the work groups that are developing all these recommendations kind of move along. And again, if anyone goes to our website, I'll say it again, www.prekpriority.org, it'll probably be on the screen a little later, you will find a whole host of reports that really lay out what we need to do, how we need to do it, what the capacity is, what are some of the funding sources. And it's there. It's ready for us to pull together into a real plan, and a plan that our whole county, that our elected officials and civic leaders endorse. So that's where we are. Right now, until we come out of the COVID situation, it's probably not going to be realistic to do much expansion or even improvement of quality. I mean, you have to be realistic, but we need to be ready for when that ends, for when we are kind of back to something that resembles the normality we had before, at least in terms of school attendance and pre-K attendance. So we better be ready, and also in the meantime be advocates. Be advocating with our local elected officials, through our state delegation. When you look at where Forsyth County is, we need those elected representatives to represent us well in Raleigh. And I think they can be encouraged by all of the participants in this webinar who are listening in to contact your legislator and say, hey, this is what we need to do in order to have those resources to improve our quality.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%, Bob. Legislators love stories. And so having families and people share stories about how, what their need is and how, if their child has been in a pre-K program, how it helped their child, or if they know of a child that's been in a pre-K program, just to show that, this is something that our community really needs. Even the statistics that you shared about where we are in terms of the other urban counties, our county needs to step up and figure out how we make this a priority.
There's a question about, you've related funding to a couple of different answers that you had in your conversation earlier. But in terms of some of the things people have seen so far, we've had some billboards. We've done a couple of things out in the community over the last couple of years. How are those things being funded currently? The pre-K priority, where is their funding that they've used to date originated from?
Well, let me first say, before getting to the funding, I don't think we put a dollar value on the amount of time that the 60 individuals who've been involved with the pre-K priority have committed. I know there's a certain value for volunteer hours, like was $22 an hour or something. But I know that if you put that all together, there have been tens of thousands of dollars in contributed time by all the people that have worked on this. And that's really what makes this work. I mean, without that, we're nowhere. But to really, I think, give us a boost and to really support our efforts, we are more than grateful to the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust because they have been the primary funder of our public education and engagement campaign, the billboards, the bus ads, the radio kind of spots. All of those have come through funding from the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust, as well as providing some staff resources for us. So again, we wouldn't be where we are either if it weren't for that support. It's made a huge difference. And again, this is coming out of the Great Expectations program that the Trust launched, again, about the same time as we got going, I think, in the last 5 years or so, if I'm not mistaken, Katura.
Right.
So again, it's been really a tremendous boost. Joe Crocker, who was the program officer for local impact in Forsyth County, was a member of our steering committee for almost five and a half years, right up to his retirement. And now Chanel Thompson has come on to become the senior program officer for local impact in Forsyth County, and she's picking up where Joe left off to provide that kind of support from the trust for the work that we're doing.
Well, and I think as most nonprofit organizations, having a budget to market the services is always limited, and you can't break through to the community and get your message across without some type of advertising or marketing. And that's why we felt like this was so important. And I think why the trust also felt that it was important and why they supported the efforts, not only with their money, but also with their staff resources. And so, it might look like frivolous money, but otherwise, how do people know what is needed by our community without sharing it? And so I think the advertisements help share that information with the community about where we currently are and what we hope to have for the future for the children in our community.
I want to ask a question that has come up, and it's related to the current pre-K landscape and the folks that may not have been as involved in the different aspects of what that encompasses. So we have private providers, we have family home providers or home residence providers, and then you have publicly funded providers. And it's a pretty intricate landscape, but could one of you or both of you speak to some of the interaction and how the reception has been in the current landscape with this initiative, wanting to kind of be a part of what they're doing already in Forsyth County?
I guess I can step in there, Bob. We have quite a few providers on the steering committee and who have been a part of the work groups, and they're very excited about this opportunity simply because they see this as a way to build a system of childcare. For people who don't know about childcare, 4-year-olds are where most childcare programs make their money because you have the larger group size child staff ratio, and so you can serve many more children. And so they lose money on the younger children. And so, just thinking about swooping this out, this age group category, and having them be served in a different setting. But when we talk to them about how we would be inclusive and ensure that, we use private sites, just like NC Pre-K does now, the public school sites, the Head Start sites, just thinking about our whole childcare ecosystem and how we can serve children, because we need, and even part-day preschool programs, most of those are in churches. We need all of those spaces in all of those facilities to be able to serve children. We just need to ensure that they are providing the best quality early learning opportunities that are possible. And of course, as Katura says, it takes resources. It takes money.
Yeah, well, I would just emphasize that we have enjoyed the participation of the different sectors, the different parts of the early learning system. And it is very complex. It just so many funding streams, different types of providers, different regulations, standards, and so forth. We can't really call it a system. System implies some uniformity and organization, and we don't have that because it was a system that was developed a little bit here, a little bit there, some at the federal level, some at the state. And so I don't think it was done with much forethought about making it really systematic. But that's one of the things that we want to be able to accomplish with making pre-K affordable and available to all 4-year-olds. That would be a uniform system, meeting all of those standards. And again, getting the funding that would enable us to have the resources to meet those standards. So I think that's a goal, again, that comes out of this process, is that we are able to achieve uniform quality standards, but I think never forgetting that we have to tailor it as well to the particular needs of the children that are enrolled. That's that equity issue, that we need to make sure that we're responding appropriately to the individual situations of each child.
Great, thank you. Do either one of you want to make any closing remarks? I think we've touched on all the questions that came up, and I'll have a few reminders for people at the end, but anything else you want to add, Katura?
I'd just like to thank Bob for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I think that we were able to share a lot of great information with the community about the work that the Pre-K Priority is doing and when we're moving. And I hope that people will join in for the next round of conversations. I think there are probably 3 more, but really do appreciate it. And thank you, Leslie, for all that you do to support the Pre-K Priority.
Thanks, Katura. Glad to. Bob, any closing thoughts?
Well, I would just say that we're 6 years in, and I think we're at that, what is often called the inflection point or the turning point or whatever, in terms of our efforts in Forsyth County. We've done a lot of work to prepare. We've done a lot of research. We've engaged a lot of folks. And now we really want to get the whole community behind us and participating in really taking all of that knowledge and expertise that's been put together and fashioning it into an action plan. So hopefully listeners to this and observers of this webinar will act and tell your friends to act to begin to let our elected officials know that this is a high priority. The pre-K priority is a high priority for the children of our community and the future of our county.
Well, thank you both. And I want to thank all the people that tuned in today to join us for the webinar. And I thank Johnny Johnson, who works here at Family Services, for helping us orchestrate this. And I want to share two things with you before you leave today, before you sign off. We want to invite you to join us for upcoming webinars, this continuing series that we're doing. Bob mentioned we are now confirmed for our next one on Tuesday, September 22nd, and that will be from 5 to 6 like this one. We're going to focus on educational and racial equity in pre-K during that session. We're very excited to have confirmed the following individuals to participate in that webinar. Our moderator will be Chanel Thompson of Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust. As Bob had mentioned, Chanel is manager of local impact in Forsyth County. She also oversees the work of Great Expectations, which is focused on ensuring all children in Forsyth County enter kindergarten ready to learn and succeed. Our panelists for the webinar are going to be Kelly Easton, the executive director of the local coalition called Action for Equity. They have already created positive change around equity within our school system and community, so we're excited to have her input. Dr. Ebenezer Mead will also join us. She's an instructor at Winston-Salem State University and president of the Educational Equity Institute that's based in Raleigh. Dr. Mead's presented nationally on racial equity in early childhood, and she's published several articles on implicit bias and also culturally responsive family engagement. And then, of course, we're welcoming back Bob Feikema, who you met today in our webinar. He will be with us as well. So do join us on September 22nd. If you are not able to tune in for any of the webinars in the series, we will also have them recorded and posted on our website. So you can always go back and see it there. And lastly, very important, what can you do today to support this movement? It's simple, but it's really important that we encourage you to sign our pre-K pledge if you haven't done so already. You can do it by going to the pre-K priority website, and you'll see the pledge posted there on your on the slide on the screen now. And if you will take that, individuals who sign that, we get their name, and then we can add that to our growing number. Over 1,500 folks have already signed on, and it does make a difference when we talk to our local leaders, our county officials, and tell them how many signatures and how many local people we have supporting this effort. It does make a difference. So please sign your name if you haven't. And then lastly, if you're affiliated with an organization, local organization that you feel could support this work or want to be involved, we have a special declaration of support document for organizations that we encourage your board or your leader of your organization to sign, or you can contact me and we can get further details to you, but that also is included on our website. So with that, we are almost at the 6 o'clock mark. We do want to thank you again for spending time with us tonight, and we hope you have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.